Good day. Unlike with other video game genres, the first-person shooter genre is actually a recent innovation, being only about 20 years old. And the company that really started it all was id Software. They basically started the genre as a whole with the release of Wolfenstein 3D. It introduced all the staples of the FPS genre, the key hunts, the progressively more difficult enemies, and the basic weapon loadout that would come to be seen in numerous games to come. Doom built off all the basic elements found in Wolfenstein, but improved upon them in almost every conceivable way. The graphics, of course, were way ahead of their time. The sound and the gore and the overall experience were unlike anything ever seen before. And a mere 3 years later, id changed the face of the FPS genre again with the release of Quake. This game brought the FPS genre to the third dimension, and unlike with many other early 3D games, this game looked amazing. The 3D models actually looked marginally realistic, and they didn't just look like a collection of polygons. And now we come to Quake 2, a game that has absolutely nothing to do with Quake 1 outside of the title. Apparently, according to Wikipedia anyway, id Software was unable to secure any trademarks for alternative names. So with that, let's take a look at War for Stragos. The graphics in Quake 2 were a major step forward. The level textures held far more complexity, the enemy models were far less blocky than before, and furthermore, the enemies took visible damage. One minor change that I rather liked was the placement of the player character's weapon. Instead of being in the middle, it's now on the right-hand side of the screen. And now that you can see the player character's hands, you can actually see some idle animations. The enemies all look fairly good as well, but they have basic textures. Gameplay for Quake 2 is standard. You shoot things and find keys, but unlike with many other shooters prior to this one, you actually have a reason to find keys and pull switches. Unlike with Quake 1, this game follows the FPS mission model. Basically, you find things in order to complete objectives. So after finding 27 keys, you open a door and pull a switch to destroy something that is important to the plot. The story for Quake 2 is rather subsumed by the gameplay. Outside of this awesome opening cutscene, the story takes a far rearward seat to the gameplay. Throughout the game, you get one whole cutscene with some text, and that's it. At the very end of the game, you get to see a cutscene where the main character escapes from an exploding ship only to land in a completely different franchise. Well, after killing all of those Strogg, the Red faction can certainly use him to kill all of those EDF drones. The story itself is fairly basic. An alien race known as the Strogg have attacked Earth, but they lost, and now humanity has tracked them to their home planet for some revenge. The player character is a lone marine that must take out the Strogg single-handed. And really, that's all the plot there is. The Strogg themselves are basically Borg, more or less. Sound design for the game is also good as well, with all the guns sounding powerful and distinct. The various enemies also have unique sounds when they spot the player, although I've never really been able to make out just what the basic foot soldiers are saying. I think he might have said clear. But then why would he say clear as soon as he spots an enemy? That's the exact opposite of being clear. Unless those foot soldiers are that arrogant that they think they can take out an enemy unit as soon as they spot them without any trouble whatsoever. Clear, huh? Well, you have clearly been reduced to a pile of guts! Music for this game is just exemplary. Outstanding, and about 27 other adjectives that describe being good above and beyond the call of duty. Quite simply, Quake 2 is probably the greatest first-person shooter soundtrack of all time. Just listen. Yes, it really does get you in the mood for killing things. Quake 2 takes a more realistic approach to the weapon of desperation. Instead of a fist or an axe, you get a blaster pistol that, while having infinite ammo, is really quite weak. The only time to use it is at the very beginning of the game or to shoot switches. The basic shotgun in this game looks rather unique and has a very futuristic feel to it. The weapon itself works fairly well against the basic strong foot soldiers, killing them in about one shot. One really nice detail that the developers added was this rotating drum animation. The super shotgun is, as the name would imply, a more powerful version of the standard shotgun. It is good for the mid-range enemies. It can actually be used to take on two enemies at the same time. In fact, there is even a hidden level devoted entirely to acquiring a super shotgun. You get the machine gun early on in the game, and for me, it is the weapon that I use most often in the game. It does good damage to a wide range of enemies, and unlike with the chain gun, it doesn't chew through ammo extremely fast. The chain gun is a weapon that should only be used sparingly on extremely powerful enemies or on large groups of enemies. In addition to being able to just chuck standard grenades, you get access to a grenade launcher that, of course, fires grenades that look nothing like the grenades that you pick up. The launcher fires the grenades a decent distance and is a good weapon for providing indirect fire. The rocket launcher is really not all that powerful, as it takes numerous rockets to kill many of the higher level enemies. The Hyper Blaster is the best high-powered weapon in the game, as it can shred high-level enemies in a very short time. The only problem is that it uses energy rather fast, which is detrimental because you can acquire an energy shield that shares the same energy pool. The railgun works well as a long-range weapon and can usually pulp an enemy in just a few shots. The BFG 10,000 works similarly to its famous predecessor, except the effect looks far better, with large bolts of green shooting everywhere and vaporizing everything. You can also acquire a number of items throughout the game, like quad damage, rebreathers, and things of that nature. But the most important is the energy shield. This goes a long way to improving your chances of survival because it will protect you from most attacks, and you can even survive a dip in the lava with it on. The enemies are actually quite varied and unique. You have several different types of basic infantry that you have to face, each with different weapons. One thing you do have to watch out for is deadfire. When you kill a basic infantryman, he may sometimes get back up and pop off a few shots that, if you're in front of them, can actually do some damage. The sergeant level infantryman is really quite dangerous, as he is armed with a chain gun, and if you get close, a powerful melee attack. Like with the basic trooper, you have to watch out for deadfire. One interesting thing that happens when he dies is a cloud of flies will surround his body. The berserker enemy is actually quite dangerous, as he will charge headlong into your fire and can take a tremendous amount of damage. Even if you hit him with a powerful weapon, he will usually pop back up again.
It's not hard to knock them down. It's getting them to stay down that's the trick.
You then have to face these heavy troopers. They have a machine gun and a grenade launcher. You need to be very careful when fighting these foes, as they can kill you in a very short order. One other interesting enemy is this demented Wally. He's armed with hooks for hands and has some weird tentacles growing out of his chest. Also, he is protected by this rather flat energy shield. You then have these odd female enemies that possess rending claws and rocket launchers. They are rather dangerous, so you should use a heavy weapon to take them down. While there really is no enemy in the game that can compare with the Cyber Demon from Doom or the Shambler from Quake, the tanks, as they are called, come close, as they are armed with rockets and machine guns and take a huge amount of punishment. This is really what you should save your energy cell ammo for, as they can be killed fairly quickly with the Hyper Blaster. Quake 2 would prove to be rather popular, selling over 1 million copies. It would also inspire numerous expansions and mods, and would eventually receive a direct sequel called Quake 4? Yes, as you would expect, Quake 3 Arena does not really count. Now, Quake 4 isn't that bad. It's just so mediocre that I find it very annoying. On one hand, the story is actually pretty good, and it does follow the mythos, I want to say, introduced in Quake 2, but the game just feels like a total conversion for Doom 3. It's just a by-the-numbers shooter, and the enemies just don't feel like they're that much of a threat. It still can be fun at times, but really, it's not the sequel
people that a great game like Quake 2 should have received.
As you should expect, I do recommend Quake 2. It's cheap, easy to find, and you can run it on just about anything, even the Nintendo DS. So this is GeneralLotz wishing you good, Deviant Cybermancy, good Borderlands, or whatever makes you happy.